What is up, everybody? I hope you're doing well. Thanks for hanging out with us today. Scratch that. Thanks for celebrating with us today. As Sheena just said, my name is Devin Reed. I'm the head of content strategy at Gong. A little bit about me in 10 seconds. I spent most of my career in sales. So I have 6 years of quota carrying experience. I was the second sales hire at Gong in 2017. Helped move when we moved up market to the mid-market team. And about a year ago, I moved over to content strategy, where I get to do awesome presentations like this, as well as manage things like social media and our content marketing. Now, today we're going to talk about time is money. 3 buyer insights that'll help you close more revenue. But before we get into all that, let's warm up a little bit, right? All great athletes warm up before they perform, and we're all corporate athletes today. And I'm a big basketball fan, so it looks like we might get a return of the NBA soon. Shout out to all the Toronto fans out there. Golden State Warriors all day. But I'm going to put you on the shot clock. Here we go. And I want you to think about all of the time-sensitive aspects in sales. And I know there's a lot of them. So think of it from prospecting all the way to signature. And go ahead and put it into the comments section. Think about all the different things in sales that are done early, that are done fast, that are done slow, that are done late, and go ahead and put them into the comments. The shot clock doesn't work, by the way. We spent all of our money on the DJ, so the shot clock stays the same, but go ahead, we'll start the timer. This is great for your patience score. If you're familiar with Gong, just hanging out in silence for a second doesn't bother me at all. So let's see if we have any answers coming in. All right, we have data entry. Hopefully that's done late in the day. Not the best thing to wake up to. We got send out a quote. We got a few things coming in here. All right, keep them coming if you want. Keep them coming. We'll keep it going. We'll see if any of these come up later today, but I mean, there's a million of them, right? There's a ton. And so why are we talking about timing today? Well, the reason we're talking about timing is because time has a huge impact in our lives. It pulls us in all types of directions, from when we wake up to what we eat and when we eat it. But specifically in sales, time has a huge impact in how we operate, right? We have got playbooks that outline, when to deploy certain conversations and certain tactics, when to ask questions, when to ask for the business, and everything in between. But sales aren't done in a vacuum. Those are just the internal forces, the things within sales that we can oftentimes control. We're also impacted by external factors, right? In just a couple short months, times have changed in our selling environment along with it. And we know so because usually the back in my day stories, right? Those old sales stories of back in the day was like 2015, 2000s, maybe in the 90s, right? But officially, any war story in sales before March 2020 deserves a back in my day, right? That's how fast things have shifted. And we also know that times have changed because the way that we describe current times has changed, right? We don't have inside and field sellers anymore. We have remote sellers. The C word is the newest, toughest objection. It's COVID. And we don't just call it the economy. We call it COVID economy, or the new economy, right? And all these shifts are impacting our buyers and how they behave. And the best chance that sellers have at being successful is to understand these new buyer patterns and behaviors so that we can react accordingly and effectively. And so as I was preparing for this, going through some research, coming up with ideas, we're going to cover 3 buyer insights, but one word really kept jumping out at me. And that's the word when, which is all about timing, right? So that's what we're going to focus on today. We're going to major in when, and we're going to minor in how. Now, you can Google anything. You can Google anything in sales. You'll find hundreds of thousands, probably millions of pages that will come up, or at least, options for you. So I'm not going to share anything that you could find on Google, anything that you could find anywhere else. In fact, 2 out of the 3 buyer insights we're going to show today have never been published before. They're brand new. So you're getting firsthand access here. And so here's what we're going to cover. There's 3 buyer insights. We're going to start with when to discuss pricing and budget with buyers. We're going to talk about the data behind time kills all deals. And then we're going to learn when to ask for time versus interest when corresponding via email. Now, if you can master these 3 things, here's the 3 outcomes that you're going to get. You're going to win more deals. You're going to keep deals moving forward, and you'll be able to generate more pipeline. Right? Times have changed, things have changed. Salespeople haven't changed because these are the 3 things we want all the time, right? And so let's go ahead and get into it. But before we do, I want to do a quick sidebar on Gong Labs in case you're new to Gong Labs. Now, if you're familiar with Gong Labs, welcome back. Thanks for hanging out. You're unstoppable. And if you're new to Gong Labs, it's okay. You're still unstoppable, but here's what we're all about. So in case you missed the keynote, really quickly what Gong does, and it will make sense for the data you'll see in a moment, is we capture all the different sales interactions from email to phone to web conferencing. And our data research team, the Gong Labs team, I think I'm the only person without a PhD on it. That's okay. And we start to analyze the buyer behaviors and seller behaviors to see what works and what doesn't at a macro level, right? So hundreds of thousands of calls, thousands of opportunities. And some of the reports that we've done are things like, the top tips for effective cold call, or how multi-threading impacts deal success, or my personal favorite, how cursing impacts sales. And so all the insights that we're going to cover today are backed by data. All right, let's get into the first one. Price and budget. When's the best time to bring it up? If I ask you to raise your hand to tell me if you've ever heard of BANT, I could, but I can't even see you guys right now. So there's no point in that. Plus, you'd probably be like, yeah, obviously, we've all heard of BANT, right? It's the OG of criteria of qualification criteria. It stands for budget, authority, need, and timing. Now, BANT starts with B for a reason, not just because the acronym falls apart if you take it off and try to rearrange it, but that's because budget is very important, right? You can't buy something that you can't afford. And so some sales teams have a really strict policy. Their go-to-market plan is, hey, we want to qualify early. We want to make sure budget is a part of that conversation. Other teams, and I've been on both sides, not really a big deal. We can talk about it a little bit later. And so we know that BANT is important. We know that budget is key, but I wanted to know how key it really is and if that's changed in today's era where COVID has tightened budgets and purchasing has slowed. So that's what we were curious in. Now, before we dive into the nitty gritty and the fun stuff of the data, we're going to bring up a quick poll here. So I'm curious what you guys think. When is it that you bring up budget in your sales process? Is it A, never, who needs it, not important? Is it B, the first call always, C, the second call, or D, late as possible? We want to do it later in the sales cycle. So go ahead and put your answers into the poll here. Wait a few seconds for it to get going here. I'll get some of the answers on my end in a moment. All right, we have some early ones. B, first call always, most. A lot of people saying never. No one's saying never. No one is saying that you should never bring it up. All right, looks like we have an agreement. Most people are saying B, first call always. Feel free to do a drum roll. We can just get right into it. And a lot of you guys got it right. So here's what we did. We analyzed over 4,000 sales opportunities. And we looked at when budget is first discussed in a sales deal to understand how that correlates to win rates. Now, all of the opportunities we looked at were in the calls were captured on web conferencing platforms. These are all B2B companies. And it's worth mentioning that all of the opportunities that we analyzed had at least 3 calls to avoid data bias. And so if you're looking at this, looks like a lot of you guys were like, yeah, on point. Dust off the shoulders. You already knew. You had the data-backed approach to your sales process. I love that. But if you weren't, this is a really good insight to take a look at, or even, like I said, to confirm what you already believed. And a lot of times sellers don't want to bring up budget early because budget can be kind of a charged word, right? It has a lot of meaning behind it, and it can feel pushy sometimes, or maybe I haven't earned the right to talk about budget. And a lot of times people think that buyers might be turned off by it, right? It's kind of like showing your cards if I tell you that I have budget, and especially if I tell you how much budget I have, right? Most salespeople, hey, tell me you have 50 grand, I can cut you a deal for 49.5. And so the reality is that buyers today are skipping the song and dance, right? They're not afraid to talk about budget early because time and resources are limited. And so people want to get right down to brass tacks. I'm okay talking about budget. It's not turning anybody off, because if we're going to keep going down this path and investing time, then maybe we should talk about budget and make sure that we're aligned there. A couple of fun, interesting like sub points behind this was it doesn't matter if buyers or sellers bring it up first. The win rates stay essentially the same, like within a point or two. So it wasn't really anything worth changing there. So it doesn't matter who brings it up, but it is key that it happens on that first call. And another cool point was that deals are longer, not in terms of a longer sales cycle, but there's more calls in a sales cycle in terms of the deal lasts longer. You know what I'm saying? Like it goes on when budget and pricing are discussed. So it's about 180% longer, right? So you're getting more interactions, is what I'm trying to say, when you discuss these things. So it shows that it is a true qualifier, and buyers aren't afraid to talk about it. Now, what about pricing? Can't really discuss pricing without budget, and budget without pricing, right? Budget and pricing go together like peanut butter and jelly, like Batman and Robin, like Jay-Z and Beyonce, like over-evaluations in Shark Tank or Dragon's Den for my Canadian folks. I learned that in Toronto. All right, you get the idea. It's very important. And a lot of times buyers might come in hot and say, hey, what's the price? Like early in a conversation, I need to know how much this costs before I even hear a value prop. And so what you want to do is, or what we did rather, was look at, hey, does the pattern continue? Is pricing and budget as married as we think they are, or is it maybe a completely different pattern? And so we ran the numbers again, same exact data set, same style. And we saw that, again, win rates are highest when pricing is discussed early in the sales cycle. And it taters off pretty significantly. And for the folks, I know no one really voted for, don't talk about budget, don't talk about pricing ever. You can see win rates are abysmal if it's not a part of the discussion. And so, again, it kind of mirrors the same thing of buyers maybe being a little mindful. Money is taboo. I don't want to lead with pricing, but especially, again, in today's economy, but there's really no reason to be. The data shows that these are things that should definitely be a part of that first discovery talk track. All right. And so here's our takeaway, our buyer insight. Buyers are not scared away by early pricing and budget conversations in today's economy. A lot of things have changed. This is one thing that we can count on. Now, I can't just leave you with insights without a few tips. So I'm going to talk about a couple of them really quickly. Now, when it comes to talking about price on the first call, you want to make sure that you don't lead with price, right? I kind of made a mention, O'Leary coming in hot and say, hey, tell me the price before the call. We really get into things. In a previous report that we had ran, we'd seen that top performers compared to average performers push out the pricing conversation until later in the call, around the 3/4 mark. And the reason that this is really important is because you don't want to lead with price and then try to build a value prop around it. You don't want to set that anchor early. What top performers have figured out is that you actually want to build your value prop first, make sure that there's even interest, and then you can talk about pricing. The next one, another one of our reports we did, was don't say the word list price or the phrase list price. Because if you think about it, if you come over to my garage sale, decent example, I know we're talking about B2B, and I've got some stuff laid out, and you're like, hey, how much does this lamp cost? And I'm like, oh, the list price is $40. Now, garage sale is probably a bad example because you already know you can get some negotiating done. But when you hear the word list price, what you hear is, this is the starting price. It's kind of hollow. We can keep talking. It's really just a starting point. We both know that we're going to get this down. And so it was also interesting in that same report was sales cycles are longer when sellers use the word list price. Because what it does is on the back half of the sales process, the topic of pricing, the conversation of pricing is longer. It's almost like it invites a longer negotiation, and it can almost cause some confusion because you're saying list price, but you don't really mean that that's the price. So instead, what you want to do is say, hey, this is our approved price. Based on our conversation today and the needs that you've described to me, our approved price for something like this would be $40,000. The last one we're talking about budget is you want to use the phrasing investment instead of cost. Now, the reason why is when you think about a cost is a loss. Didn't mean to make that rhyme. I couldn't think of a synonym. It's just best I could do. And so if you think about it, like if you get a parking ticket, is that an investment or a cost? Right? It's a loss. It's a cost. I'm just throwing money away. But if you think about things like investing in your kid's education or your own education, you're putting money aside, would you consider that a cost or an investment? Probably an investment because you know you're getting something back. And so when you're describing pricing and budget, you want to say, hey, you're investing in this technology or in this solution, not that it's a cost. It's a subtle but really powerful difference. All right. Next, we're going to get into activity. When do buyers respond? When it comes to following up, how soon is too soon? How do we balance staying on their radar without becoming pushy as salespeople? Because the line between pleasantly persistent and annoying is razor thin. And this is something that we ask ourselves when we're building out our outbound cadences. Shout out to Outreach. And when we're trying to move deals forward once you're in an opportunity, right? But we all know that if you wait too long, then a deal cools off, because we've all heard the phrase, time kills all deals. And so this was something I was thinking about when we were running this part of the research. I've heard this before. I think every sales leader I've ever said, or I've ever worked for, has said, time kills all deal. And it's a way of driving urgency. And so in sales, we need to be proactive to take action. We need to move, but it's important to know when to move, right? Timing is everything. And so we should pause on a second and think about what's the difference between sales activity and engagement. Sales activity is things that we measure internally, right? It's a sales nomenclature. It's phrasing we use internally. Number of dials, emails sent, meetings per week, talk time, right? There's a ton of them. All of these are sales metrics, but no buyer thinks of that, right? No buyer is like in the middle of a sales process and you're like, Devin is crushing the talk time. His outbound emails are great, right? That's not in their world. And so what we're trying to do, and engagement on the other hand, is the return. That's when sales activity converts into engagement once it's reciprocated, once they respond to us, right? And so our goals as sellers is to turn that activity into engagement as quickly and as often as possible. And so to make our sales activity as effective as we can, we need to understand when and how buyers respond. So that's what we did. We analyzed over 75,000 cold emails to understand when buyers respond to those emails. Here's what we found. These are the response rates for a cold email. So if you see, we start at 5% the same day. So if you send the email on a Tuesday, your highest likelihood of getting responses on that same day. Probably not a huge shock, right? You kind of feel that even if you haven't thought about the numbers. But what's really interesting is that massive drop that happens from the same day to the next day, day one. 24 hours later, it drops by about 500%, right? From 5% to 1%. And then it's a gradual decline until it hits 0% at day 6. I left day 7 and day 8 to show you flat lines. You're not going to get a response back. And so what does this tell us about buyers? Their interest is immediate. You either caught it or not at all, right? And so you either got their attention and got a response, or you missed the mark, ended up, you're getting your email deleted, and you got to try again. And so maybe the email wasn't compelling, but that's okay. What you want to do, don't succeed, dust yourself off, try again. And so I'm not saying that you should go and email your prospects every single day to make sure you have the highest response rate or likelihood to get a response rate, because you might annoy people, right? You might get hit with the unsub. Not when someone clicks unsub, when they type you back unsub to let you know. Yeah, that's the worst. So what this says instead is, hey, if you're looking to make your outbound cadence as effective as possible, maybe you send an email every 3 and 4 days, right? When you know it's cooled all the way off, but you're not being annoying. The other thing is that you can use multiple channels, right? There's LinkedIn messaging, there's video, there's calling. Email is just one of them, but I know it's really prevalent, so I wanted to focus on this. And this is the type of visibility that you need when you have a target list accounts and you're trying to break into things like ABM and upmarket. If you have a list of top 10, top 20 accounts you want to get into, you need this level of visibility to understand, hey, how are we really attacking? How often? Knowing that we have this new insight of when buyers respond. Now, I said times change, buyers are changing. And buyers actually change once they're in a sales process. So when you go from cold or prospecting phase into the deal itself, there's a shift. And so we looked at those emails as well. And if you're wondering, hey, why don't we look at cold emails or cold calls when people respond? We all know that no one calls back to cold calls. I think I've gotten 3 in my entire life, and 2 of them was early in my career just to tell me to never call back. So we stuck to emails for this one. Now, when we look at deals, we see a similar pattern. Now, luckily, the response rates are much higher once we're in a deal. See around 60%. They know you. Hopefully, they like you. They're at least interested in what you're talking about. So you do start with a much higher response rate, but you still see that from same day to day one, there's a significant drop off, right? About a third of the engagement. And then it still tapers down over time. Now, luckily, this one doesn't get to 0 by day 7 or 8. It goes out a couple weeks, but it is a consistent 1% drop every single day. And so again, when you're working a deal, when you're prioritizing your accounts, and you're trying to look at things like engagement, right? How is this account warming up? Is it cooling off? These are the type of things that you're going to want to look for to understand, hey, how engaged are they truly? And when is it, if we haven't heard back in a little bit, when is, soon a little too soon? And when is the timing just right? All right, so let's get into our buyer insight. Prospects respond to cold emails immediately or essentially not at all. So sellers, we need to drive action to increase buyer response rates. Okay, well, how do we drive action? You might be wondering. That's our third insight for today, how to drive action. Now, there's a lot of ways to do this. So we're going to zone in on one specific factor. But for this one, it's, looking at when you're asking for buyers, hey, should I ask for time or should I ask for interest, right? Because usually what you're trying to do is get them to meet, right? You want to, if you're don't have a time on the calendar and you're in the deal, you're trying to find times to hook them into a call so you can engage with them, sell to them. Or maybe you're on the prospecting side of things and you're thinking, hey, should I ask for time or interest? Just trying to get something set up, just trying to introduce myself. And so here's what we did. We analyzed 3 types of call to actions, 3 CTAs, specifically looking for ways that we could drive results, get that response from buyers. I say buyers, prospects, and buyers in the opportunity for right now. And so here's what we did. We analyzed, I believe it was around 300,000 emails. It was a lot of emails, and specifically looked at the call to action, right? And so that's the, hey, do you want to meet? Hey, are you interested? And we broke it into 3 groups. Now, when we were looking for success, we didn't just look at response rates because, again, you might get a response that's negative, or sometimes responses don't lead to meetings. And so right now what we're looking at is prospecting emails. We'll get to deals in a second. Now we have 3 buckets. One is the specific CTA. Ask for a meeting using a specific date and time. Something like, hey, Catherine, are you available to meet Tuesday at 4 p.m.? The second option is open-ended CTA, which is ask for the meeting, but it's open-ended. Do you have time next week to meet? Time next week, yeah. And then the third one is the interest CTA. So it asks for interest, but not for time and not for a meeting. So an example would be, hey, are you interested in exploring X or learning about Y? And so before I show you which one is most effective, let's bring back our poll. And I want you guys to put in your best guess, or maybe the one that you use today. So when it comes to cold emails, you're prospecting, which one of these CTAs do you think is most effective? We have 1, or A, the specific CTA asking for time. We have B, open-ended CTA asking for the meeting. Or 3, the interest CTA asking for interest, not the meeting. Go ahead and put those into the comments, or go ahead and put it into the poll rather, and we'll see what you guys think. All right, the early results are in. People are saying the least one is open-ended. People aren't vibing with that too much. And the most common is interest CTA. Oh, about 57%. Okay. Interesting. All right. Well, here you go. The moment of truth. When it comes to cold emails, ask for interest, not the meeting. I found this really interesting, but if we think about it for a second, Why would interest CTA be twice as effective as specific CTA? Now, when I was, getting my foot in the door in sales, I was taught specific CTA. Make it really easy for them to say, hey, does Tuesday at 4:00 work, right? Because then they get to their calendar and they say, the slot is either open or it's not. It provides an anchor point. I had been using this for a long time. And once in a while, I would sprinkle in the interest CTA, like, hey, does it make sense for us to chat? Is this even interesting to you? But every time I would do it, I was really unsure, like, is this really the best foot forward, right? Especially when you've done your research, your 3x3, your why you, why now messaging, you spend all that time on it. And then you go to the CTA and you want to make sure that you really top it off the right way. And so I was unsure. And so that's why we did this analysis to help people generate more pipeline. And it's really, really simple change to do. Now, I did say that we're going to look at cold emails and deals, and we know that buyers like to change it up on us, or do they? So for the next poll, the final poll for today, I want the same question, but for deals. Once you are in a sales cycle, which one of these CTAs do you think is most effective? Again, we have the specific, ask for time. We have B, open-ended, or C, the interest CTA once you're in a deal. So go ahead and put into the poll here. What's really interesting, why you guys fill that out, is this is the one that we have published already. So maybe some of you guys have seen this before. But after the report came out, it was really interesting because a lot of salespeople were saying, hey, I use the specific CTA, I use the specific CTA. And then when they saw the data, they were really surprised. On the other side of the coin, when I was talking to some of the more senior people, like, decision makers, senior directors and above, they were like appalled that people would even think specific would be the best way, right? They're like, obviously you should confirm interest before you ask for time. And that's because time is a really finite resource, right? It's something that we hold close to us. We don't want to give away time, right? We want to invest time. And so they were saying, yeah, of course, it feels weird because you have to add a step of, instead of booking time, I'm booking interest, and then I'm booking time. But it was really cool to hear from senior leaders say, hey, this is absolutely the best way to do it. And one of the CROs that uses Gong said he A/B tested it right when this report came out. He got 0 responses to the same email with specific CTA, but he got 5 responses on a small sample size for interest. So it was really cool to see those results. All right, so let's see what the poll says for our next one. I can't see the notes. It's okay. Unstoppable style. We're going to go live. So here's how it changes once you get into the buyer. Oh, we confirmed this. I skipped a slide. Once you get into the opportunity, it flips completely. It goes the opposite direction. Instead, what you want to do is ask for a specific time instead of the interest CTA. And you can even see the open-ended CTA creeps up a little bit here. So why is that? Why do buyers shift so drastically from cold to deal? Well, it's kind of in the name. You're cold. You don't know me. I don't want to give you my time until I'm interested. But once you're in the sales process, interest is confirmed, right? They've already invested time. Then you can get right to the point. You can get in there and say, hey, Devin, does Tuesday at 4 work? You get a little more casual. You know that their interest is high. So you can go ahead with a specific to the point email. So what's our buyer insight here? When it comes to driving action via email, for cold emails, ask for interest, then ask for time. But once in a sales cycle, you can ask for time to keep deals moving forward. Now, again, these are the type of things that you want to have visibility into. If you're a sales leader, you want visibility into this, into both your, into your demand gen efforts or your pipe gen, as well as your deal momentum, right? You want to start to see these types of things. Make sure that your team is using the most effective outlet. And for sales reps, it's really quick and easy because we have a doc for you. At the end of this, I'll show you why. We have 43 highly effective CTAs that will give you. You can use it yourself, share it with your sales enablement team, add it to your playbooks. But these are data-backed tips that will work for you. So I'll show you how to get that in a second. All right. So we went through our 3 buyer insights, how to align with buyers to close more deals. 1, discuss pricing and budget on the first call. But remember, do it later in that first call. Build your value prop first. Next one is you can use response time to guide your sales activity, understand when you should be reaching out. And if you're in a deal, you can start to see when deals are cooling off, right? So it's great for deal predictability. And the last one, when it comes to emailing and trying to drive action, ask for time or interest, depending on the scenario. Now that's our time for today, but a reminder, if you post your favorite takeaway for today, you'll get an additional raffle ticket. And those 43 CTAs that I promised you, all you have to do is add me, tag me, Devin Reed. I'll make sure that I send it off to you directly. Don't have to put your email in or anything. Just download the PDF and you can start using it today. Now, if you enjoyed this presentation, if you like the data-backed approach, follow Gong on LinkedIn. We publish one of these reports about once every month. We share the different insights from previous reports about once a week. And then we also post some really fun content, as you've seen from the way we do events today. And feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn as well. My name is Devin Reed. If you have any follow-up questions, you want to chat more about the data, any questions maybe that it spurred, I'm happy to. And all of these insights are are available for Gong customers. You can either see and or measure all the things that we covered today to make sure that you're putting your most effective foot first. So that's it for today. Time is money. That's all my time, pun intended. Sheena, back to you.